My name is Arya. Not my real name, but close enough. And what I'm about to share isn't just a story, it's a warning. I didn't stumble into this, I was dragged. You see, when you live with someone for years, you start believing you know their rhythms, their truths, their love. Oh, I believed in ours. Until one night, that belief shattered with a whisper. It began with a name, a strange name on a bank alert, one I'd never seen before. Ileana Morrow. 3 syllables. That's all it took to light the fuse. A fuse that would expose deception, betrayal, and the slow, quiet war my husband had been waging against me. His name? Mason. A man who wore charm like a second skin. Everyone loved Mason. His clients, our friends, even my mother. But they didn't live with him. They didn't hear the way his voice dropped when he thought I was asleep. They didn't feel the cold space in our bed, or see the late-night messages he guarded like secrets written in blood. I wasn't always this cautious. I used to be trusting. I used to assume the best. But trust, it doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes, quietly, like rust. And Mason? He wasn't just planning to leave. He was planning to take everything with him. But what he didn't know was that I was already watching, already listening, already preparing. This isn't just a story about heartbreak or betrayal. This is the story of how I stopped being a wife and became a strategist, how I went from victim to architect of my own comeback. He thought I'd be too emotional to fight back. He thought wrong. This was never just a marriage. It was a battlefield. And the moment he whispered, "She doesn't suspect a thing," I realized something chilling. He never loved me. He only loved control. But in his eagerness to win, Mason forgot the first rule of war: never underestimate the quiet one. Now, if you're ready, I'll tell you exactly how I unraveled his lies and made sure he never saw me coming. It was 2:37 a.m. when I opened my eyes to an empty space beside me. The bed was cold. Not just cool, cold, like no one had been there for hours. The kind of cold that makes your skin crawl with quiet panic before your mind has even formed a thought. I reached across the sheets, searching for Mason's familiar weight. Nothing. Maybe he was in the bathroom. Maybe he'd gone to grab a glass of water. But then I heard it. His voice. Low, careful, whispering. I froze. Mason never whispered. Not on calls, not in casual conversation. He was always smooth, confident, unapologetically loud. So why was he whispering now? I got out of bed, barefoot and cautious, and moved toward the hallway. The house was dark, save for a slice of moonlight spilling through the window. It fell across the floor like a spotlight, catching every movement, every breath. And then I heard it, crystal clear. His voice low and slick. Just a little longer. She doesn't suspect anything yet. I stopped. The words hit like a punch to the ribs. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, everything inside me went still. He was talking about me. No question. There was no mistaking it. No stretching it into something innocent. Who the hell was he talking to? I strained to hear more, but the rest was too muffled. My heart pounded. My fists curled at my sides. This wasn't a work call. Mason didn't even care if I overheard his work conversations. He had always been careless about that. This was different. This was planned. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps. I darted back to bed, heart thundering, sliding under the covers just as he entered. The mattress shifted beneath his weight. He lay down like nothing had happened. Calm, steady. I turned, pretending to wake up. "Where were you?" I asked, voice soft. "Bathroom," he said without hesitation. "And the call?" "Client stuff," he replied. "Nothing important." I stared at him, his eyes unreadable in the dark. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down, I knew something was terribly, dangerously wrong. The next morning, Mason slept soundly, his breathing slow and steady like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just whispered a secret into the night that cracked our entire world in two. I, on the other hand, hadn't slept a minute. I slipped out of bed quietly, wrapped in a robe, my mind buzzing. The kitchen felt colder than usual, like the walls knew something I didn't. I stood at the counter, hands shaking slightly as I opened my banking app. I'd never needed to look before. Mason handled most of the finances. I trusted him. Stupid. The moment the transactions loaded, my stomach twisted. $500, $1,200, $750, $2,000, over a dozen withdrawals in the past few months, all from our joint account. None of them familiar. They weren't for bills. They weren't for anything we had discussed. They were strategic, hidden beneath everyday spending, small enough to fly under the radar, but consistent, purposeful. Behind me, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps. I quickly locked my screen. Mason entered, rubbing his eyes, yawning like he hadn't just pulled off a heist in the dead of night. "Morning," he mumbled, opening the fridge. "What's for breakfast?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I set my phone down, calm as still water. "I checked the bank account this morning." His movement paused, just for a breath, barely enough to catch, but I did. He turned around, a casual smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah? Everything looked good?" "There are a lot of withdrawals I don't recognize." He shrugged, pouring himself coffee. "Small investments, just testing the waters with a few things. Business opportunities." "Business?" I asked. "Short-term stuff, easy returns." It was a lie. I could see it in the way he gripped the mug too tightly, in the slight twitch of his jaw. Mason was good at hiding things, but not from me. Not anymore. The rest of the day, he was glued to his phone, always in the other room. Screen always face down. He thought I didn't notice. But now, I noticed everything. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. And I knew I had to move before he did. That night, Mason was all smiles. He curled up next to me on the couch, cracked a few jokes about work, even suggested ordering Thai food, my favorite, which he conveniently forgot the last 3 anniversaries. It was an act, one I might have believed a year ago. But tonight, I watched it unravel. He laughed a little too easily, checked his phone just a little too often. And then, he made his first real mistake. He left his phone on the coffee table, face down, like always. But this time he walked away, into the shower. He never left that phone unattended. And just like that, fate gave me a glimpse behind the curtain. The screen lit up. Message from Ileana Morrow. Preview. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost there. I stared at it, unable to breathe. My fingers hovered just inches above the device. I didn't need to open it. The preview was enough to confirm everything I feared. Ileana wasn't a client. She wasn't family. She was a co-conspirator. And they had a plan. The words burned into my brain. Almost there. Almost where? What were they counting down to? The water stopped. My heart leapt into my throat. I shoved the phone back into place and sank into the couch, trying to look as relaxed as possible. My hands gripped my knees to stop them from trembling. Mason returned, towel around his waist, casual and dry. "Decide on dinner yet?" I nodded, barely. "Maybe Thai?" He smiled, grabbing his phone, unlocking it without hesitation, without a care in the world. Either he thought I hadn't seen anything, or he thought I wouldn't do anything even if I had. But I had seen enough. That night, as I lay beside him, listening to his even breathing. I whispered one question into the dark. Who the hell is Ileana Morrow? I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, because I was awake now. Wide awake. And I was done playing the role of the unsuspecting wife. By morning, I wasn't the same woman who had stared at that text in shock. I was focused, cold, clear. Mason sat across from me at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee like a man without a worry, like someone who believed the illusion he'd built was still intact. And that's when he tried to make his next move. "We should get our financials in order," he said, casually stirring sugar into his cup. "Just in case of an emergency." I blinked. "Our financials?" "Yeah, passwords, account numbers. We should keep it all in one place." His voice was smooth, but I saw the tension hiding in his shoulders. He wasn't suggesting convenience. He was laying groundwork, setting the trap. Mason had never cared about my accounts before. We had separate savings, mutual respect for privacy. That was always the unspoken rule. But now he wanted access. I forced a smile. I guess I could put something together. His lips twitched upward, pleased, but not for long. That evening, he handed me papers over dinner. "Tax forms," he claimed. I glanced at the first page. Legal jargon. My name. His name. But something felt off. My instincts screamed. Then I flipped to the last page. Property transfer agreement. Everything in my name. My savings, my condo, even the emergency fund I'd built quietly over the years, would legally transfer to him. I looked up. He was smiling, calm, measured, like a predator in a tailored shirt. "Mason," I asked, voice level, "what is this?" "Just a precaution, legal convenience," he shrugged. "You're asking me to sign over my life to you." "Not all of it," he said with a small smirk, "just the parts that need protection." I stared him down, paper trembling in my hand, not from fear, but fury. "I'm not signing this." He leaned in, voice like ice. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Aria." I didn't blink. Is that a threat? His silence answered for him. He thought I was cornered, that I'd fold. But what he didn't know was that I had already made my move. And soon he'd find out just how wrong he was. By the time Mason sat me down the next morning, the script was already written. He exhaled like this was hard for him, like he was doing something noble. "I think we should separate," he said. Just like that, no discussion, no apology. Just a cold, calculated exit line delivered with the rehearsed ease of a man who had practiced it in the mirror. I didn't flinch, I didn't cry, I just watched him. Head tilted slightly, the way you might watch a fox circle the henhouse. Beautiful, clever, dangerous. "You've been planning this, haven't you?" I asked. He blinked once. "We've grown apart, Arya. You must see that." That line, so lazy, so rehearsed, it almost made me laugh. Number, this wasn't about growing apart. This was about Mason trying to walk away with everything he could carry, my assets, my name, my dignity. He leaned forward, his expression smooth. "Let's not make this messy." I leaned back, voice steady as a blade. "It's already too late for clean breaks." His eyes narrowed, waiting for me to shatter, to plead, to panic. But instead, I struck. "I already moved my assets." I watched the words land like a slap. His posture stiffened, his breath caught, barely perceptible. But I noticed. "What do you mean?" he asked, voice sharp. "Exactly what it sounds like," I said, sipping my coffee. "You don't own anything, not the condo, not the accounts. You never did." His jaw clenched, a vein rising in his temple. For the first time, the mask slipped. "You're going to regret this," he muttered, voice dark and trembling with fury. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. I sat on the balcony, city lights stretching like constellations beneath the skyline. I thought about every lie, every calculated move Mason had made. He thought love was ownership, but I had finally learned the difference. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the legacy I would leave behind, not as someone who got played, but as the woman who rewrote the rules. And Mason? He had just lost his queen. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. Sharp, measured, official. I knew before I opened it. A man in a navy blazer stood outside holding a thick envelope. "Arya Kellen?" he asked, expression unreadable. "Yes." He handed me the papers. "You've been served." No surprise, just confirmation. I closed the door and walked to the kitchen table. My fingers trembled slightly. Not with fear, but with fury. I peeled open the envelope and scanned the top line. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Below it, Mason's demands. He wanted half of everything, the condo, the car, even spousal support, as if he'd been the one betrayed. I let out a short, bitter laugh. He didn't want peace. He wanted revenge. But Mason didn't understand something vital. He wasn't dealing with the woman he once knew. That woman, the one who trusted without question, who believed his stories, was gone. I handed the papers to Patricia, my lawyer, the next morning. She skimmed them, her eyes narrowing. Then she flipped to the financial section and smirked. "Well, Arya," she said, tapping the page, "he's got nothing." I blinked. "Just like that?" "Just like that. You moved everything to a private trust before he filed. Legally, he has no claim. As for spousal support, your income dwarfs his. There's no court on earth that would grant him a dime." I sank back into my chair, a slow breath escaping my lungs. The tension I'd been carrying melted off my shoulders, like frost in the sun. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't surviving. I was winning. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine. I had just taken the first real step toward freedom. And then the front door slammed open. Mason. His tie was loosened. His face furious. "You think you're so smart," he hissed. I didn't flinch. "I think I'm finally protecting myself." "You planned this," he accused. I set my glass down calmly. "So did you." He stared at me, a storm behind his eyes. "This isn't over." "No," I said softly. "It's not. But I promise you, Mason, this time, I write the ending." Mason thought losing in court would break me. What he didn't understand was I had already been broken. The real damage wasn't done by a judge's gavel or legal documents. It was done long before that, when he looked me in the eyes and lied like I was nothing, when he whispered to another woman in the dark, when he made me question my reality, my instincts, my worth. But rebuilding doesn't begin with revenge. It begins with truth. And the truth was, I had to start over, alone. The next few days felt strange, quiet. My phone didn't buzz with texts from Mason. No backhanded compliments. No tension hanging in the air. No pretending. The apartment was still. For once, silence didn't feel like danger. It felt like space, like breath. I began taking walks again. The city looked different. Or maybe I did. I replaced the sheets on our bed. Got rid of the dishes he liked, but I never did. I donated the suit jackets he'd left behind, neatly hung in the closet like tombstones of a past life. But I kept one thing, a small photo frame. Not because I missed him, but because I needed to remember. Sometimes we don't rebuild because we want to. We do it because we have to. Because staying in the wreckage is no longer an option. One evening, I sat with my mother and my best friend Beatrix. We were eating takeout on the floor like teenagers again, laughing over nothing and everything. Beatrix raised her glass of wine. To Arya, for walking through fire and not burning. I smiled, not just with my mouth, but with something deeper, something that had been asleep inside me for a long, long time. I'm not who I used to be, I said, surprising even myself. No, my mother replied gently. You're stronger. That night, I lit a candle. Not for him, for me, for the girl I used to be, for the woman I was becoming, and for the promise I made in the dark. No one would ever get that close to destroying me again. There's something liberating about no longer waiting for closure that will never come, no longer waiting for apologies wrapped in manipulation, no longer waiting for someone else to change, when the only person who needed to was me. I no longer measured time in how long since Mason left or how many court motions had passed. I began measuring time in strength, how many days I'd spent standing tall, how many nights I'd finally slept through, how many mornings I woke up and didn't check my phone with dread. Then one morning, a familiar voice called from Patricia's office. You should come in, she said. We have a settlement. My heart didn't race. There were no butterflies, no shaking hands, just a steady sense of readiness. When I sat down across from her, Patricia slid the paperwork across the desk. No dramatics, no buildup, just truth in black and white. Mason had withdrawn all claims, every financial demand, every attempt at control. He was walking away with nothing. He had no assets to claim, no evidence to fight with, and no lies left to spin. His silence in the final pages said everything. There was no final jab, no veiled insult, just a signature. He gave up, I said aloud, scanning the document. Patricia smiled knowingly. He lost the war the day you stopped reacting to his chaos. And she was right. Mason thrived on drama, on pushing buttons, on watching me crumble. But I didn't break. I planned. I protected. I endured. And in the end, I didn't just survive him. I outmaneuvered him. That evening, as the sun dipped low across the city skyline, I poured myself a glass of champagne. Not for celebration, but for reclamation. The balcony breeze kissed my skin. The lights twinkled like distant possibilities. And I finally felt peace. Mason's name no longer triggered pain. His lies no longer held weight. And for the first time, I whispered to myself, this is my life now, on my terms. Not his, mine. I used to think betrayal would feel like an explosion, sudden, loud, unmistakable. But in truth, it felt like erosion, quiet, subtle, like water carving through stone, slowly wearing me down until I couldn't recognize the shape of myself anymore. And by the time I realized it, Mason had almost hollowed me out. Almost. But not completely. What he never understood, and what I had to rediscover, is that strength doesn't come from avoiding heartbreak. It comes from surviving it, from rebuilding when no one is watching, from standing back up over and over, even when your legs shake. When you've been betrayed by someone you loved, the world stops making sense. You question everything, especially yourself. Was I too trusting? Too blind? Too weak? But I've learned something else in the ashes of what we used to call a marriage. It's not weakness to love fully. It's not foolish to believe in someone. The real danger is forgetting that you still have a choice when the illusion breaks. I chose to fight. Not with fists, not even with fury, but with clarity, with truth, with silence. That silence, the one that used to terrify me, now it comforts me. It reminds me that the storm is over, that I am still standing. that I am no longer afraid of the dark. And if you're listening to this and you've ever stood where I stood, confused, betrayed, unsure of what comes next, then I hope you take this with you. You are not broken. You are not helpless. You are not alone. There is strength in your scars. There is wisdom in your wounds. And there is life after letting go. A better life. A freer one. One where you set the terms, not them. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt blindsided, used, or underestimated, know this: you're not alone. And more importantly, you are not powerless. You have the right to protect your peace, your future, and your voice. If you face betrayal and come out stronger, share your experience in the comments. I read every single one. Drop a broken heart to strong in the comments if this resonated with you. And let others know they're not alone either. Subscribe for more true stories of resilience and strength. And remember, your story doesn't end in betrayal. It begins with how you rise after it.